All right. I guess we were talking about the last question I had asked was about your grandparents.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and my grandmother's maiden name was Chris. We got off into that out of wedlock.
Yeah, there you go.
But one of her sisters had a child named Dalton, and I've always heard Dad said Stanley Belleville was the father. But anyhow,
who's also a relative.
was Chris side. But that house is still there on Wolford Maskell Road. The current owners is a guy just retired from barbering, Dennis
Stout.
Oh my gosh.
Greer.
His son was with him, Dennis,
Steve,
Rex Dennis.
That's what I meant.
Rex Dennis.
I said Dennis Greer, I meant Rex Dennis, yeah.
And that house, there was another house behind on Wolford Maskell Road where Dad was born, where it was the old Christ house. And the kind of a funny story behind that is after my grandfather died, Uncle Frosty was taking care of the business side of the estate, and the county wanted to assess more real estate taxes for this old house that I used to play in. I mean, it was built way back in the 1800s. I mean, it had a chicken roost on the outside. I mean, everything. But they wanted to charge him more real estate tax, so he just had called the fire department out, and
let him practice
Danny
putting out
Barron's
fires.
mother wrote an article on that.
That's good. Just give the house away and let him practice putting out fires.
That's right. So he burned it down. So that's
instead of the county taking taxes for it.
So, and then up the road was where our great grandfather lived, Willis, and like I said before, he gave that to Frosty, my Uncle Forrest. And what's kind of weird is Willis's wife's maiden name was Macklin, and all the land across the road on Wolford Maskell Road was Macklin land. Now I've never done any research on the Macklins. I don't know. So they just,
I remember Mom saying we were related to them. Yeah.
Big tie-in. So
it's kind of a joke when you talk to people when they ask, is there anybody in Union County that Max and I is not related to? And especially me, when the Roushes got involved, when my Verna Amrine married a Roush, boy, that just broke things wide open. And that, because Roushes settled the southern part of the county, down in there, that's what they call the German settlement. And I guess there aren't many people we aren't related to.
even when Abraham came, his wife's maiden name was Wolford.
Yeah, I forgot about the Wolfords. Yep.
And both families came to get back in those days. I mean, that's how they traveled, and entire families moved together. And so we have never hung around with the Wolfords, at least I haven't in Marysville, except I know Todd the old barkeep, but so we're tied into the Wolfords, but I've never done any search that way.
I know we're related there some way.
In central Union County, we're tied into a lot of people. I mean, just a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much northern Union County, but
central.
Yeah.
And that's why, if you notice where the high school is now, where you went to high school, it's called Amrine Mill Road.
Mm-hmm.
That's because where that road kept coming on through is where they had their big mill on Mill Creek.
And there was a bridge.
And there was a bridge there. And that's why it was called Amrine Mill Road, because it took you down to the mill.
And that was
bridge,
the only mill in town?
I believe so. The bridge collapsed. In fact, it was condemned, and about a week later actually collapsed. And I've got an article here somewhere. There was an article in the paper, a history article about it. I'm pretty sure it was in the 30s. That it went down, or before we were born.
Yeah, well, you can still see the abutments, or whatever you want to call that, the stone It was built on stone pillars. You could still see them on each side of Mill Creek, but then everything else was gone from there.
All right, so give me one moment. Okay, so why don't we move into the 40s? You had talked a lot about, now we're getting into your childhood and war years and things like that. Of your memories of the 40s, of what you remember of your parents or stories you've heard?
Yeah, what I remember of the 40s is different than it is now. Parents were the boss. Now kids are the boss. You didn't talk back to your parents. You didn't say, "I will call the police and report you, and then they'll take you away, and then I can do what I want to." There was discipline in the schools. There was courtesy. I never thought I would never. I still have trouble with this, is because people I see that I knew when I was growing up, and of course they may be in there. Well, a good one of that is it just happened at a funeral home for the Basinskis when I was there. Lou Blasi's wife. Well, I called her Mrs. Blasi. I didn't, and she says, "When are you going to start calling me by my first name?" And I says, "Probably never, because I was so conditioned by my parents that you respected seniors and you didn't call them by their first name or a nickname. They were always Mr. or Mrs. There was a lot more respect for the older generation than, when I say older generation, the generation that preceded us, that was the one ahead of us, would be like our parents' generation or their parents' generation. I think there was a lot more respect. There's no respect. I feel very little respect for our generation.
Is that what you feel, Mr. Amrine?
Mr. Amrine. That make you feel old.
Well, now I tell people to call me Jim, because Mr. makes me feel real
That's
old.
right. That's why it wasn't any problem joining the service. To say Mr. to somebody was
or sir.
Or sir was nothing.
That was no problem. Because we did that all the time.
In the 40s, I don't have a lot of remembrance of because it was just, I was on the farm, never went to town. You had to entertain yourself doing whatever.
Where were you born?
Well, I was born in Marion General Hospital up in Marion, Ohio. Because
were you? I never knew that.
Union County did not have a hospital until about 1952. But I was, as a baby, infant, I lived up by the Magnetic Springs area. And in 1940, I want to say 45 or so, somewhere in that ballpark, Dad bought the place on Wolford Maskell Road down below my grandfather's. But you had to entertain yourself.
Oh, yeah.
There was no kids. There was no kids around. So you're by yourself. And I was an only child, really, because Marilyn was 8 years older. So she was, when I was 8, she was 16 and off, high school and all that kind of stuff. So you had to entertain yourself. But in the 50s, like he said, discipline was much more apparent, or it wasn't something. It was just automatic. I don't know what it was. It was.
Well, it was.
I think fear is the greatest thing because fear is good.
Fear. Well, the rule then was, if you got in trouble at school, you're going to get in more trouble at home.
Yeah.
Now, if you get in trouble at school, well, let me call our lawyer and we'll see how we can sue them.
There was never a question about teachers.
No. And I can remember Jerry Kingsmore. Mr. Kingsmore was the principal. If he walked down the hall, you got against the wall and he had the whole hallway he went by. And I can remember the phone ringing one night, and he said, Jim, he was talking to my dad, and because everybody knew everybody then. And he says, had to take it to the boy today. And he was talking about my little brother. Because honest to God, I never got in trouble at school. Oh, I didn't. I saved his ass. I saved his ass a lot of times though, and he will admit it. Now,
Later years.
Yeah, later years in high school, I'd keep his ass out of trouble all the time. Saving, boy, saving isn't a word for it. God, he owes me so big, it's ridiculous. But and he said I had to take it to the boy, and I remember my dad saying, "Thanks for calling me, Jerry." And then he took it to the boy, and so you didn't question teachers' authority. Now, were some people out of line when I look back on it? Yes, they were out of line. We had a teacher by the name of Porky McKillop that was totally out of line, and I know Porky, or Donald McKillop. I know him now. He was a coach back then. I talked to him last year, and it was a different person than what I knew in school.
Wow.
I mean, just totally different. There was not that intimidation factor and fear factor, and he was mean. Yeah, he was mean. I mean, to be honest with you, and some things he did were wrong, but as an overall umbrella,
Most kids got what they deserved.
Yeah, and if they had rules, you went by the rules.
And you broke it, you paid.
And if you broke it,
you paid the price.
Yeah. Now, there are no prices to pay for breaking the rules because they're afraid to set rules. Courts have taken it all out of that, and I see that all the time. But the 40s and 50s were great because now you can drive around Marysville and you go up and down every street, and everything now is organized. Little League baseball has to be organized. Little League football has to be organized. Playing basketball has to be organized. There has to be somebody that's vicariously making themselves a hero because they didn't play, coaching these kids and acting like they're Vince Lombardi or somebody going crazy. But everything's organized. When we grew up, God, you go all over this town. If you didn't get to the Big Four Park, there was a place called the Big Four Park over on East 8th Street. And if you didn't get there by noon, you didn't get to play because you already had 18 to play a baseball game.
Yeah.
And there were no adults. No adults
None,
telling us what
none.
to do or anything like this. We just played and had fun. We would play basketball on a day like this. It's about 32 today.
Ish.
We'd be outside playing basketball.
Because there was no inside place to play.
There
Was no
and you'd see it
inside
at
place
houses
to play.
all over Marysville.
Yeah.
We'd go out and play tackle football in the backyard. One of the roughest players that we had playing tackle football was my mother. I mean, she'd clothesline you if you know what a clothesline is, and she you can remember her playing out. She'd go out and play tackle football in the mud. She was one of the strongest women I ever knew.
We used to think your dad's house on 8th Street there was a huge football field. Huge. It was a
The
small
backyard
yard.
was long.
Today, I mean,
Now we look at it and we go,
my gosh.
wow,
Oh,
that wasn't
yeah.
that big, but it looked like you ran forever.
Oh.
But she would come out there and play tackle
Yeah.
football with you. She played for the Stocksdale Dollarettes, who won the state championship in slow pitch softball for many consecutive years.
Before we knew what girl sports were.
Yeah, she played for
I-
them until
And
she
so
was
what is the Stocksdale? Is that-
Stocksdale Dollarettes
Softball team.
women's slow pitch softball team, and she played for them until she was 56 years old. And
Mary Howard?
they talked about her back when she was young, and they had women's fast pitch softball that they played at Big Four Park, and
And these
she
were
was-
community leagues?
and she was quite an athlete playing baseball, but well, she'd been a great football player because she could just wipe you out. I mean, it was funny to see that. my dad's health was never good enough to do that, other than
Yeah,
nobody
yes.
could ever outrun him. He challenged, kids in the neighborhood would challenge him all the time, and he'd take them out to the alley and he'd run barefoot on the stones, and they could not beat him. They could not beat him. I remember the Kirshners always tried to beat him. Said they could outrun him. They couldn't outrun him. It was always fun. But it was a different era. Everything's organized. You didn't have, well, Max was one of the few lucky ones that had a car.
Oh, in high school.
Yeah, in high school.
Senior year.
Well, it was still senior year. He had a car. He had an old gray Studebaker. What year was it?
55 Studebaker.
A 55 Studebaker.
With a
And
transistor
we'd all
radio.
chip in a quarter and
Gas
buy
was
$1
a quarter
worth
a gallon.
of gas, and what was it, a quarter a gallon?
Quarter
wasn't
a
it?
gallon.
So we'd all chip in a quarter and each buy a gallon of
We could
gas.
just ride around.
And we could ride around town all night. Now, of course, there wasn't a big distance we had to cover.
You can imagine how small a town was. So.
But there was what is now, it's all torn down, but over by where community market is and the pizza place, there's a place called The Point, and it's been little restaurants and everything, and they built a place there called Huey's Hurricane, and it was just like there used to be a TV show called Happy Days, of where they all gathered at this ice cream or sandwich place, and they had the booze and the music and the dancing and the jukeboxes and the counter, and that was Huey's. That was our place for Happy Days, and that's what it was. And they even had car hops.
Almost felt like he was in the country there.
Oh yeah, it was out in the country. I mean, it was funny.
What year did that close?
Oh,
Well, it closed as
it went through several stages.
yeah.
Because I remember as a child a stage where there was some like large statue or something that was on top.
Half or most of it was like the drive-in restaurant, and then the front end of it
Like a Dairy
was like a
Queen type.
Dairy Queen,
Yeah.
Yes.
dairy aisle.
Okay.
And I don't know when that closed. Huey,
I was in the
his
service.
name was Huey Long, of all things, which I don't know if he was ever related to those crooked politicians from Louisiana, but Huey Long was his name, and he had the real wavy blonde hair combed straight back. I mean, he looked the part to own that kind of place. I mean, tanned and short and everything.
My senior year, when we skipped class, we'd go out to Huey's to have a cup of coffee
Yeah.
and not worry about Mr. Widener or anybody driving out there. I mean, it wasn't that it was way out in the country. I mean, because our school was just down on 6th Street. But yet it was, back in those days, 6 blocks was a long way. I mean, whatever. It
Well,
was just different.
back in those days, if you lived in town, it didn't matter where you lived in town, you walked to school.
Yes.
Now, if they live more than 2 blocks from school, parents require them to be bused, or they have to go by private vehicle. We went by what we called legs, which, it's the lower part of your body, and we walked to school, or we rode bicycles everywhere.
If you know where Edgewood is on Grove Street, west of that did not exist at all when we were young. None of it. In fact, across the street from Edgewood did not exist. That was all open field.
Yeah, that's where we played football.
Well,
That was Scott's test plots.
yeah. So
And then let's see, Edgewood opened, the west end of Marysville at Edgewood right there, opened when my brother was going into 6th grade, because he moved from west, what they called that, East Elementary and West Elementary. And he moved to Edgewood. It had just opened, and that's when he was going into 6th grade. So how old are you when you're in the 6th grade?
12, something like that.
Is it 12?
When we were sophomores.
So it would have been in 59 that Edgewood opened?
When we were sophomores, we built, we
We.
seniors, juniors, and sophomores, built that baseball diamond behind Edgewood. It's gone now.
Yeah.
But that's where the high school baseball diamond was.
And we
Prior
had
to that,
to
they
build
played
it.
baseball at the fairgrounds,
And we had to
inside
build
the
it.
track.
And can you imagine students building it now? Or even asking them to build it?
Yeah.
I mean, I just can't see it happening. Facilities, and we didn't think anything.
Labor
was
was pretty cheap.
Labor was cheap. Yeah. And
Now, when you went to this diner at the Point,
Mhm.
did you have to have a car, or like would people walk there, or was it like socially a thing that?
I didn't
When
know I
did it
had a
start?
car.
I mean, you say you were the only one, so like it wasn't a car culture.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Because like you see in American Graffiti, it seems like there was a big car culture.
Well,
but
now a lot of people had cars.
Remember there were single car families in those days.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Wasn't two cars
if,
per
if you
family.
had a car that you were driving, it was your dad's car. I know I was never allowed to have my own personal car when I was in high school, but he would let me use his car and drive over there or walk over there because it wasn't very far from where I lived on
Yes.
8th Street.
Yeah.
do you have to take your siblings?
No.
My sister was 8 years older than I. Remember?
Oh,
My
okay.
brother
He
was
gone.
My brother was 4 years younger than I was,
So no,
and I was never
no,
forced
no.
to take him any place. Parents raised the kids then.
Prior to me having a car, the summer of going into our senior year, I never went. I never went to Huey's. I mean, I didn't have a way to get there. Gee, didn't have a car.
And we also had Frost Top Drive-In. We had A&W Drive-In.
Yeah.
Those are root beers.
A&W
bowling alley.
A&W is Benny's, right?
No, Frost Top is Benny's.
Oh,
Yeah.
Frost Top is Benny's.
A&W is where the
had
bowling alley
A&W.
is.
Mm.
Yeah.
But we had those three places that when we would go cruising, that's what
Yeah.
we put our quarter in for, you know. And we don't know what we were doing, but we were having fun. The other thing was we started work early too. I remember I had a paper route. How old were we? We detasseled
Detasseled corn
corn.
at the age
It's
of
called
14.
detasseling corn at the age of 14 for 50 cents an hour for D.G. Scott Farms.
We'd meet down by, well, it's behind
It's-
Jerkman, but near where Bonded is or was, Bonded filling station. We'd all meet there each
There used to be
morning.
a Dairy Queen out on the edge of the street, and McAuliffe's Hardware was behind.
Well, that's before McCall's was.
It was before McAuliffe's was behind it. McAuliffe's was downtown.
Yes.
And then they built behind
Yeah.
the Dairy Queen, and they built the new Ace Hardware out here. But we would meet there, and they would take you in trucks out to the.
God, we'd get like a $15 paycheck for a week's work, and I'd feel like,
Feel like you made $1 million.
oh, 50
But-
cents an hour.
And it was not fun work.
No.
It was not fun work. You were standing up. It was like, to put it best way, it was a wagon that had planks on the side for people to stand on with railings so you didn't fall off. And there were certain rows. How many rows was
Every
it?
6 rows, and you skip 2.
Every 6 rows, and you would pull out. You know what a corn tassel is on the top of the
We'd
corn
detassel
stalk.
the corn.
We pull those out as you went by them, and the tractor's pulling you down these roads.
Hot.
Hot,
Or
sweaty.
it could be early in the morning that was wet.
Wet, you get cut bugs
Oh.
everywhere, you get cut by the
Oh.
corn leaves and everything like this. But we were making big money,
It was,
50 cents an hour. I mean, that was pretty good. And then Max, of course, hit the big time. He moved into the easy job at the Dairy Queen, selling
worked there
ice
for
cream.
4 years.
Selling ice cream for 4 years. He got the cake job, you know.
During the summer. And then in the winter, worked at Wagamont's.
And did you work at Wagamas?
Yeah.
See, and I really lucked into a cake job because we were neighbors of C.B. Mills, who was the chairman of Scott's Lawn Company. And I was over there playing with little Chid one day, playing basketball. And Mr. Mills, see, I can't break the habit. Mr. Mills came out and said, "What are you going to do this summer?" And I says, "Well, there isn't anything because they quit the detasseling and everything like this." I think this was my sophomore year and freshman year. I worked for my uncle on their farm baling hay and cutting the hay before we'd bale it and helping him milk in the morning. He lived down by Ostrander, and that was Verna Amrine's husband, Arnold Roush. But I would do that, and I says, "I don't know, there aren't many jobs around." And he says, go down to Scott's. He says, go down to Scott's, see Carl Schwarzkopf. Tell him I sent you to find you a job. So I went down there, and he sent me out to the Marysville Country Club.
Yeah, gee whiz.
And that was the cake. That was the plum job. Because once you got into Scott's, which it's not that way anymore, I worked on the golf course mowing, and they had 2 students, Russ Scheider and myself. And the rest of the people working on the golf course were, quote, full-time employees of Scott's. And Scott's maintained,
Scotts took care of it.
took care of the golf course and paid for all the materials and everybody that did it. And I always thought what was funny, we had a small restaurant downtown called Wilcox's. At 9 o'clock, they'd pull this pickup up. Glenn Stillings would pull up a pickup, and Russ and I jump in the back of it, and the other 3, Stacy Johnson and Sam Geisinger, would be in the front seat with Glenn, and we drive all the way into town to Wilcox's for a break. It was funny until one day P.C. Williams, who was the president of Scott's, came walking in when we were sitting there, and they didn't know what to do, so we just sat there and he didn't notice us, so we made it. But once you got a job at Scott's in the summer, you were always guaranteed a job every summer until you graduated from college, which, so I lucked out that way. He sold ice cream, and I mowed fairways and aprons.
And what'd you do with the money?
Spend it.
I saved mine.
I spent it.
I saved mine because I was told I had. It was my mother again said I had to save it, so most of it went in the bank.
Well, you made big bucks. I wasn't making.
Oh yeah, I saw what I was making. It was like $1.50 an hour.
I made a buck. Terry,
You know.
Martha would every now and then she'd say, "Oh, Max, you're working so hard. Here's $1."
That was big.
And that was what was 4 gallons of gas.
That was a big tip. That was a big tip.
You know, yeah.
But there was a time when Dan Barons, who owns the paper now, and I lived next door to him. We grew up next door to each other. We could tell you who lived in every house in Marysville, just about. And now, I can't tell you who my neighbors are. That's the difference. I mean, I can tell you who lives across the street,
you know
who lives to me on the left, and who lives on the right, and I swear to God, those are the only neighbors I can tell you their names of mine. That's the difference. Before, you knew everybody.
Like I say, if you saw a car coming, you knew who it was.
Oh yeah, and you didn't want to speed, because I can remember going down Maple Street one time, and before I got home, what was her name? Lillian Shirk, who worked with my mother at Nestle's, had already called and told them that I was speeding down Maple Street. Because no matter what you did, somebody was going to report you to your parents. Everybody, quote, was your parent.
Yeah. Everybody looked out for each other.
I'm serious. It's true.
All right, so what was the biggest trouble you ever got in?
We don't want to go there.
I can go there.
You can rat on each other.
Let's see.
I'm never drugs. Never.
Well, no, they didn't have drugs in that.
That's right. Thank goodness.
First drugs I ever knew about was my freshman year at Bowling Green, when they said, "Hey, one of the Sigma News, who's from New York, just got arrested, and they raided the Sigma New house, and they arrested him for marijuana." And I said,
"What's marijuana?"
"What's marijuana?" I'm dead serious. I mean, that's the truth. What is marijuana? And they said, "Something that they smoke." I said, "Oh my God!"
You got to remember, we grew up where we grew up here.
Kicking you out of school.
There was never drugs. We didn't know what segregation was. We didn't know what the N-word was. We didn't know, almost didn't know what prostitution was, really. I mean,
well, not really. No.
I mean, in a way, you never thought about sex till you was at least like 16 or so, roughly. Today, it's 10 or whatever,
Ugly third graders.
But I mean, it was an innocent. The 50s were an innocent time.
It was more
If you
innocent.
could say that.
I mean, this generation today didn't discover sex, but it was more innocent
Yeah.
back then. But getting into trouble, I'm trying to think of what trouble I got into. I think the biggest trouble I got into, I don't know if that was even trouble. My dad ran out of gas going uptown one time because I'd used it all and hadn't put any in it. And he wasn't real happy. No, biggest trouble. The only time he ever laid a hand on me, seriously. Sophomore year, playing reserve basketball.
Okay.
And as you know, as I'd said earlier, my mom was quite an athlete. There was a ball game on TV, she'd do every game, everything ever did. I came home and she was telling me everything I did wrong. And so I said, well, if you don't like it, why don't you just stay home and not go? I remember saying that, and then I can remember we had a long living room, or what seemed long to me at the time, in our house.
Everything
And I can remember
yeah.
being parallel to the floor and was airborne, flying, and landing, and then this little guy that was a lot smaller than me, it was my dad, was on top of me and said, do you have anything else you want to say? I go, nope, that's it. But I think that was the only time I was ever in, quote, trouble. Because I never got in trouble with the police. I
wish I could say that.
I didn't I didn't get into trouble at school.
I wish I could say that.
My brother does too. And one time we did have the police looking for us because Mike Mack and we were out soaping windows, which you did at Halloween then.
Yeah, that was normal.
Oh, that was normal. But we were out soaping windows. But Mike Mackin had taken firecrackers away from David Sherburne, who was 2 or 3 years younger than us, and he took them because he didn't want him to get hurt, and hurt himself.
Sure.
And so he reported it, and the police were looking for us. But we knew we were pretty safe because they only had one police car. And it would sit downtown, and there was a light bulb overhead at the square. And if the police were needed, because they didn't have radios in the car, if the police were, you talk about Barney Fife, if the police were needed, the light bulb would light from wherever they called it in to the police station, and they'd flip the switch, the light bulb would come on, the police would go to the police station, find out where they were supposed to go.
Make a call and find out.
And make the call.
Yeah.
So if something else was going on in town, you knew you weren't going to get caught. So if you could keep away from one policeman,
That's right.
you were in good trouble. Or
And who was the policeman at the time?
Well, Dick Simpson was chief, and Dick Simpson was the type of guy, and his daughter was in our class, and he was the type of guy that he was really, could be really stern.
But he was my savior.
But he would also try to save your butt.
Yeah.
From your parents?
From
No.
from the judge.
Yeah.
Max has more stories than I do
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
But we had fun. I think that was the biggest
Two
thing.
funniest things I got in trouble for. Seemed like every time I did something, I got caught. I'm one of those guys.
He's one of
that I
those.
couldn't get away.
Like you were talking about that girl last night where Jared shoves her down the hill trying to get out of the way. That was poor Max. Everybody else is running
Junior
like
high,
that,
I never
and they
skipped.
catch Max.
All the way, we went to the same school building for 9 years on 7th Street. Of course, it's torn down now, but in junior high, I think I just did not like Latin. So I was going to skip a class, not the whole afternoon, just skip a class and hang out down by the gym, that grade school over there.
Yeah.
Kingsmore caught us. Very innocent, skipping a class, couldn't get away with that. But the funniest incidents that everybody laughs at my sophomore year, our sophomore year, we always had a sock hop after a football game in the gym. Today they don't do those kind of things, but
the sock hop is where you danced with your socks on. You took your shoes off, and you had to dance with your socks on so it wouldn't damage the gym floor.
You got to remember, kids didn't get out that often, so a dance was a big deal back in those days. After the football game, or basketball game, or whatever. And so anyhow, I was a manager on the football team. I didn't go out for the football team that year. So one of our illustrious classmates comes up to me and says, I got a 6-pack of beer. Okay. I didn't buy it. So he had it. So he said, let's go out in the bus barn and drink it. So 3 of us. I think it was 3 of us.
Tom Harriet was one of them.
Tom Harriet, David Stevens, and I.
Yep. Tom's dead now.
Yeah. And so we went out, and in the old bus barn over there were big ruts in the ground for tires, so you could slide underneath the doors. There were big, So I'm the last one going in, and as I'm going in, I see headlights out in the parking lot. Somebody's just pulling up the park out in the big part of the parking lot. I didn't think anything about it. But people watched out for people in those days. So somebody, I don't think it was Mr. Widener himself, I think somebody went to Mr. Widener and said, hey, there's some kids in the bus barn. So there was about 3 or 4 buses parked in there. That's all the buses we had.
Oh, yeah, we didn't need more than that.
So anyhow, we had just gotten into a bus. I don't think we'd even opened up a beer. Not one. And all of a sudden, here comes the sliding door opens up, and the headlights of a car is, in there. So we end up at Mr. Widener's house on Mulberry Court, and my parents had to come to town till about 2 a.m. in his house. He's wanting to know where we got the beer. I had known Stevens had it, and I know where he got it. And it wasn't from his dad's place. He got it from old man Bright.
Bright's Ice House.
Yeah, because the guy couldn't see. He had Coke bottle glasses.
On Maple Street at the railroad tracks. Yeah. That's where it was located.
So that, I've had to live with that for a long time, the bus barn is there. All the kids in the class knows about that, and I laugh about it. It was an innocent deal. So there was really no punishment for that, other than we was up to his house for, of course, my poor mom. Anyhow, Dad never said a word to me about it. Dad never...
He didn't say much.
He didn't say much. He was very quiet.
He was a very quiet person. I mean, really, seriously, very quiet.
So anyhow, that was one incident. And then the other incident, for which we're probably more infamous or famous, I don't know, whichever way you look at it, was our senior year. And that is probably, just having possession of being in a bus was probably the only time I broke training until this night, our senior year, after our, the night before, no, the night after the Westerville game, which was like we only had 2 games left. We had somebody come down by the Dairy Queen I'm working, and I think it was Barron's, say, hey, how about tossing some money in for some beer tonight? We're going to party up at Stevens' house. Stevens, that same name again. Anyhow, matter of fact, I'm going to see him at the Rose Bowl. He's going to be there. But
he'll have the beer.
But so I threw $2 in, and my date that night was Sherry McBride. And so I went home after I got off work, cleaned up, went into Stevens' house because she was working at Weiss's. And I can remember I had a couple of beers, and I was stoned. 2 beers, and I was drunk. I had somebody drive me uptown, and I can remember almost falling out of the car. Sharon was waiting up outside, and I remember when I opened the door, I almost fell down, right there on the square. And she came in and got in, and so we went to the party. And anyhow, out of 12 seniors on the football team, 10 of us got booted off, and we got booted off the rest of the year for everything. Basketball, I didn't play basketball, baseball, and we had a good baseball team, I thought, coming up.
We would have had a great team.
Mackin and myself and McMahon, Don Ebright, Carmen Roush.
Pete didn't play baseball.
But there was,
How'd you get busted? Or where did the bust
they
happen?
bluffed us. Somebody,
They left him.
it was that big. I mean, the party was so big that,
Word just got out in the community.
yeah. So Monday, when we went to school, I can remember Tucker. I had a grapey schedule. I mean, I'd taken enough classes earlier in school. I only had like 2 classes I had to take, senior English and civics. And so my last period was always being like an assistant phys ed teacher for Tucker. And so he calls me in that little coach's office way back there in the corner.
Back behind the ticket office.
Says, and of course I deny. And so anyhow, we go out to the field house to get dressed for practice after school. And so Wacky walks in.
That was the football coach.
And I really liked Wacky. But anyhow, he said, we understand this has happened, and we want all you seniors to leave, all of you, and none of you come back until you disclose what happened. And basically that's what was said. So we walked out. I remember going out the gate and going down to get in the car, and we turned around and told Fritz. Fritz wasn't there at the party. Fritz and Bergie and Jack.
They were the only 3 from the team?
Oh,
That
seniors.
weren't-
that
yeah,
weren't invited.
the se-
We told them to go back the next day. We just said, that's probably the best thing we did out of it. We said, go back. We never did confess it.
Oh, Bill Noakes, he was a senior.
Oh, that's right, Bill Noakes.
So,
Yeah. But the guys that weren't there, we told them to go back, the next day. And we just didn't go back. And then one thing, I mean, nothing was, we just weren't invited out for any other sports. That was it. So it was a tough issue at the time for you when you're growing up, sure. But some ways you can laugh at it when you get older. There's still some people have bad feelings. I won't mention who, but you both know. But it was, I mean, we paid the price.
Classmates,
It
or are
was
you
a
talking
little-
about other people in the community?
Yeah, classmates. But it was a little severe for one party. That, I mean, the punishment was a little severe.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that you knew what the rules were. They had rules. And if you broke them, there was no compromising on what the punishment was going to be. Because you were told at the beginning, and Max and I have argued about this often, you were told at the beginning, here's what's going to happen if you break the rules. And it was the fact that you don't play anything.
Well,
you're done.
I don't think. Okay, I mean, you knew what the rule was, but there were never rules explained. I mean, and I'm not using that. I'm saying, there was never any paper sent home like the.
Oh, there was no paper.
There was no. I mean, I'm not using that. I'm not saying that. I knew what the rule was.
It was an unannounced rule.
Yes.
There you go.
They didn't have to say it. They didn't have to.
You didn't have to say it. They said.
So it was, it was a tough issue. I regret not being able to play baseball here, but that's the way it goes.
So did you not invite him to your parties?
No, I did not go because
I didn't do the inviting.
I knew about it.
Did you?
Yeah.
Beforehand?
Yeah. Yeah, from Mackin and.
Is that right?
But I knew what my punishment would be from my dad and mom if I went.
I just never
did
thought
anything
about it.
like that.
Just
And
went.
so didn't go because I think Mackin and Stevens and them, hell, they started smoking when they were sophomores.
Yeah, see, and remember the point I said about I didn't
Sophomores.
break training again until that point in time.
Yeah, and these guys were doing it all the time.
These other guys had been trust me, smoking and drinking throughout the whole
Oh, and
season.
I'm talking about.
And
I
not in front of me,
Oh, I saw Mackin at his
but-
house drinking hard stuff because his parents did all
but
the time. You know, and it was just, you used that word before called fear.
yeah.
You know, and it was just, no, just because of what my parents they would have come unglued, you know. And tell you, kind of show you how things were. So Fritz, who's dead now, see, that summer, and they're talking about, well, was there a double standard set? Because that summer he had gone to Europe, back to the homeland. His last name was Rausch, Bernard Frederick Rausch, and his dad was Clarence, and they called him Doc and Bertha. And they'd gone back to Europe to visit the old homeland, and that, well, word came back, and it came from Fritz and everything like this, that while he was over there, they drank wine.
Well, they drink wine over there.
Oh, that's all they drank was wine. And that was one of the positions taken by some of the people in the community is, wait a minute, why is he excused? Because this summer he drank wine on vacation the whole time he was gone. And these guys had a beer, they're off the team, and he's a hero. I can remember that position being taken. And they said, well, he was with his parents, and that was the norm over there, that you couldn't drink the water. So, you know.
And we had another senior that, because he had a ruptured spleen,
Yeah.
the next day, he was in the hospital. Not that he was there that night. And that's okay. I don't, you know. He had a ruptured spleen the next day and went in the hospital and didn't play
From
the
a
game that
tackle in
night.
the game. I mean,
Or,
tackle.
yeah, and so he didn't get caught up in
He
it.
didn't get caught up
Yeah,
in it.
yeah. So
But
Yeah,
going back to where
interesting.
we started, the Amrines, as I told you yesterday, it's kind of sad that name's going to be gone from this area after it's been here except for if you see a street or you see a road, and nobody will know what that
they'll
means.
probably change the name.
Oh yeah, they'll change the name of the
Somebody will
person.
change the name.
It's the person that gave the most money to build a Dairy Queen on that corner, or something. But that name's going to disappear from this area. And that name's been here, like I said, since late 1700s.
Now John's son, Marty, I believe, has come back to live in the area.
Oh, has he?
Yes. So, but that's the only other Mayo Amrine that I.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still in touch with him.
Are you?
Mm-hmm. A little
Yeah,
bit.
he's.
Yeah,
I don't
it was
know
my
if
year.
he graduated or.
Oh, he was in your class?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's the sad
Yeah.
thing about it. When it used to be one of the quote prominent names in the county, and now it's
Yeah.
it's just changed. But
When you read a book, you'll find there was an Amrine that donated a lot of money to High Westland. There's Amrines in there that were justices or whatever, you know. So
and then
and we had a
ironically,
sheriff.
well, ironically, when we were at your wedding, you know, you introduced Max to that one guy that I don't know his name, Joe Megabucks. What was his name? He had all this. The millionaire that was at your wedding. There may have been.
Oh,
more
I
than
remember
one.
talking
Oh.
to somebody.
You mean
Real nice guy, you know. You
Marty Rabinowitz?
Huh?
Martin Rabinowitz? Or
I can't
Anyways,
remember
and he was the one telling, you know, after Max got talking to him, said, well, have you ever heard of the Amrine Gallery in
Yeah.
New York, which is one of the famous art galleries in New York City?
Mhm.
Remember
Never heard
that?
of it.
And
Yeah.
of course, we'd never
No,
heard
no.
of it, but he had. I guess it's supposed to be a very famous and influential art gallery in New York City called the Amrine Gallery, or something like that.
That was an interesting
It's
discussion.
owned
Yeah.
by Amrine. But I can't think of. It was just different. I know you get upset with me quite often because of my quote non-ultra liberal viewpoints on things, and I'm probably kind of hard-headed on that and conservative in the sense, but I guess it's because of the age that you grew up, of what you grew up with, that nobody had their hand out. If somebody needed food, you knew it, you took it to them. You didn't give them food stamps.
But that's part of because you were a smaller community and you took care of your own. And now the community, as you've pointed out, is not a community anymore. It's a bigger sphere.
Yeah.
And so the bigger sphere has to take care of its own. And unfortunately, you don't seem to know the people that you're taking care of. And that doesn't feel quite
things.
right.
But the thing that bothers me the most is the way that, as I see the corruption in the system. I see kids in school, or parents having kids in school. I've got 19-year-old students that I work with that are freshmen. The only reason they're still in school because they can be, because they're still living at home, and they get an SSI check. And if they quit school, the SSI check goes away. See, that's not right.
Well, and not to belabor the point,
I mean,
but one of the details of this healthcare reform bill is that kids now are going to be covered until they're 26 on their parents' insurance plan. Now, what are we encouraging? What are we encouraging?
What we're encouraging is what I'm out there trying to break the cycle on, to keep the kids in school, to have them get an education so they can get a good job. But now we're encouraging them to carry on the same cycle
and live off their parents
that their parents had.
Yeah,
as a free handout.
I'm sorry. Don't get me going. My daughters and I don't talk about a couple of subjects.
See, it's the same thing. He has the same thing with.
There's two subjects that I am very rock hard on, and
he has the same subjects with Nicole and Michelle.
Yeah.
We can't talk as you and I do, because it's a generational thing. It really is, and then I see the corruption as I follow people through the community market or Kroger food line, and I look and I'm going, wow. Look what they just bought. And then, I'm getting this size steak and they're getting this size steak, and then they peel off a food stamp. And I go, something's wrong with this picture. If you're on food stamps, it doesn't mean that you should be having a job before you're not on food stamps. And I know I understand the unemployment situation now. That I understand. It's as close to the 30s as you're ever going to get. But we never had steaks growing up.
Yeah. Oh gosh, no.
Oh my God.
Never.
We
didn't even have soda at home.
Yeah. Max and I on Friday after school, a big treat for us. On Friday after school, we were grade school. Max and I would walk from the school that block up to the firehouse where it is now, and Kevin Payne and Highland, they were the chief and assistant chief.
They'd give us a Coke.
And they'd buy each of us a bottle of Coke out of a Coke machine, and it was, one of those glass bottles, and we thought that was the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have it at home. Because if you couldn't afford it, you didn't buy it.
We got too many handouts today. Too many handouts.
I have a book at home I think I'll give you and let you read, and that's Understanding Poverty. And I think I've got 2 copies there that I've read a couple times because I needed to, of going into these kids' homes and trying to work with them and help them. And at the same time, I'm trying to help their parents. But I guarantee you, every home, not every home, 80% of the homes that I go into, because most of our students that are in the online program are at-risk students and at the poverty line or below. But you can be sure of one thing. The car has spinner hubcaps, which go for $500 to $1,000 a set, and they have a 64-inch screen TV. And I am not exaggerating. It's the truth. And I say something's wrong with the
I
system.
think some of those people need to go hungry. They need to go hungry.
Well, I
didn't say starve.
I won't go that far.
I said they need. Well,
I won't
but
go that far. I would
I'm
never.
sorry,
I would never ask a kid to go hungry. Never in my life.
we're paying unemployment benefits. We keep extending it. Why should I go to work?
Well,
I get free money.
well, see,
You know.
that's the thing.
Now there are some people that need. There's a percentage of, but those people don't stay on unemployment benefits. It used to be shameful. My dad, when he was unemployed, went in the back door to get his unemployment check. Would never have thought about going in the front door. It was shameful.
See, and I think we're going to see it get worse because so many people are out of work now. What I've found out is that now the military, they used to take anybody, you could enlist. Now you have to have a high school diploma. McDonald's, if you're not a student and you want to go to work there full time, now they're requiring you to have a high school diploma. Well, do you realize how many of these kids that I'm working with, where are they going to work? If they can't even get a job at McDonald's when they quit school. And all they think about
I
is
always
quitting
say
school.
life's full of decisions.
I know.
If you make the wrong decisions,
Well, that's why I say if I
I'll
could
say it on your tape. Tough shit.
if I
That's the way it goes.
well, that's why I feel if I can save 2 or 3 kids a month, I've done
You
a
know,
great job.
I
You know what I mean? At least maybe we can break the cycle, and that's all we're trying to do is to break
They
that
should've stayed in school.
cycle. But the government
I don't feel sorry for them. They should've
has
stayed in
made
school.
it too easy. As I go back to my parents, back when we had the Depression, and back to Harry Truman, who to me was one of the greatest presidents ever. Of course, you never hear his name mentioned, but if you read about him, he didn't pawn it off to somebody else and things like this. But if they wanted something, they had to do something.
Mhm.
You had to work to earn it. Now, it's kind of like they're entitled. In other words, we owe it to them. You have it, I want my share of yours.
Mhm.
You shouldn't have as much as you have, because that's not fair. Because I'm a person, and therefore I should be equal to you, and therefore give me enough money
What's
to
another
make
name
me
for that?
equal to you.
What's another name for that?
But we get in trouble if we say that.
Socialism? Communism?
I don't know. I'm not allowed to say.
Exactly what it is.
I'm not allowed
That's
to.
exactly what
But
it is.
you know, that's the way it seems. Like when now I've worked all this time, and now they want to tax my Medicare. You know, put a tax on it. They accepted if you live in Florida, where all senior citizens in Florida to get this guy to vote for the health bill have been exempt
The
from that.
Medicare Advantage is not being taken away from them.
Right,
Medicare Advantage.
right, which I have.
Just in Florida.
Just in
Now,
Florida.
how can they do that?
Because they
How
wrote
can
that,
that be
they
legal?
wrote that in the health care bill,
How can it
so
be
he
legal?
would vote for
Well,
it.
it's like Nebraska. Forever, we
fund their Medicaid
are going to
program.
pay their Medicaid forever
Yeah.
for new recipients even.
But
The only state. How can that be legal? I think things are going to get contested in court. I
know a lot of people think the country's going to hell in a handbag because we are not divvying up and sharing our wealth and everything and what I worked for or what you worked for. You spent 20 years in the Navy, retired from the Navy, was smart enough to get an education while you're in the Navy, then retired from Honda, worked hard there, a lot of hours every day, retired from there at the same time running your own tax practice, which you work 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, from January 1st to December.
He doesn't normally praise me that
April
much.
15th. No, I'm just telling you real world, from January 1st to April 15th, and yet you're supposed to do all this and then feel happy about giving what you've worked hard to make back to somebody else. Now I give to charities, local charities. I make sure they're local. I guarantee you that.
When I worked full time, I used to
and that
give quite a bit, but not now.
But to
Tired.
see what's going on, I feel like the rich at the banks and places like this, they take care of themselves. They take the money, they don't care.
Well,
Do they care what the press is saying about their millions?
I got a few clients that make more than $250,000. Okay, not many, but few, and they're by no stretch of the imagination rich. They're not hurting,
Yeah, I was going to
Okay.
say they shouldn't be hurting.
but they're going to come in and they are getting clobbered. Why? I mean, they earn what they're getting. I just.
They're getting clobbered because somebody else is not, or they're not able to. Now, if they have a physical ailment or something like that,